You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
My guest on The Luxury Item is Daniel Daggers, founder and CEO of luxury real estate company ddre.global and star of Netflix's property show Buying London, which followed some of London's most successful property agents. Daggers has worked in real estate for nearly 30 years. His sales volume exceeds $5 billion, or around £4 billion. He has advised royal families, successful entrepreneurs, and high-profile individuals from the world of sports and entertainment to finance leaders. In 2019, Daggers sold one of London's most expensive homes for a reported £95 million. On Instagram, he's known as Mr. Superprime. In London, Superprime refers to properties valued at £10 million and above. Daggers is one of the first British agents to adopt social media as a sales and branding tool. While the majority of DDRE's transactions are UK-based, the company sells luxury properties in the world's most desirable locations from Dubai to Hong Kong. Welcome to The Luxury Item, Daniel.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that you could join me. So, I first learned about you and your firm during a 2022 episode of the Netflix reality show, The Parisian Agency, that follows the Kretz family and their luxury real estate agency, Kretz and Partners, as they help clients buy and sell homes in France and abroad. And you appeared on the show as a guest where you visited one of the Kretz's listings, this 32,000 square foot castle in France, as the family worked to impress you in order to form a partnership on super prime properties. Your firm was already 2 years in. What opportunities did that appearance on the Parisian agency open up for you?
Okay, great question. Let me just start by, I'm a Londoner, and in the UK, we're pretty passive about business. Yeah, we've got a hierarchical view of how we earn our presence in markets. And over the years, I've sort of flirted with the concept of more awareness. And doing the Parisian show with the Kretz family, who are lovely, by the way, they are the people that you see on TV, was a sort of litmus test on what does awareness on Netflix create for you, if anything. And so my little segment there enabled me to recognize that awareness is a good thing. It was amazing how many people we sort of see the show that are either one or two people away from me. The degrees of separation are tiny as the world gets smaller. And there was business opportunities fundamentally, and that was the purpose for it. So we've engaged in pieces of business since that show. And then obviously it gave me a little bit more confidence to commit to doing our own one.
And you spent 12 years at leading agency Knight Frank and parted ways with the firm before founding ddre Global in 2020. And in the 4 years since, ddre has sold, I'm reading, £600 million of real estate, most of it in the UK. So when you launched your own firm, do you have a model in mind of how you were going to sell luxury real estate and deliver value?
Yeah, I did. During my time in my previous firm, I bounced around the world and sort of understood different markets. Okay, I went for as far as Australia and then through Europe and the US. And when I saw the impact of social media having, i.e. the independence of individuals and their ability to essentially market themselves and real estate over social channels, and the negative impact of GDPR and finding it really difficult to reach the customer, I knew that the only way, or my feeling was the only way that we were going to grow a business rapidly and do so at the customer's interest by heart, was by putting our people ahead of the corporate brand. So we essentially replicated what they do in the US and mainland Europe and Australia, where the individual sits in a brokerage and they're the service provider. And that's what we did. And then we utilized some learnings of working in a state agency in the UK, where the corporate brand leads and they just have a different structure to the business that can support individuals. And so we sort of amalgamated the two and now have essentially what we would call an advisory business that looks like a brokerage.
And Buying London dropped on Netflix this past May in 2024, similar to the shows that have come before it, like Selling Sunset and Buying
Yeah.
Beverly Hills and Buying London. Features a blend of showcasing aggressively luxurious homes and inter-office drama. The main players are you, Mr. Super Prime, as you go by on Instagram, and your team of real estate agents at ddre Global. I know the show hasn't been picked up for Netflix for a second season, but what have you learned from your experience in the global spotlight that will help you grow in a post-Netflix world? What did you learn about branding and business, and how did that change your perception of things?
Well, there's a lot to unpick there. The Netflix thing is fascinating. Fundamentally, more awareness, more business. And Netflix is one of the greatest media channels for you to deliver a message to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have been, particularly in the UK, focused on this very sterile, poised vision of what service providers look like. When the truth is, you can't hide behind the suit anymore.
Right.
And in fact, the suit, in my eyes, doesn't necessarily reflect a vision of trust anymore. And without showing any forms of personality, you cannot engage with people. You know, there's too much noise, and people want to do business with people that are similar to them or that they like. And so there was a lot of drama on the show. I wouldn't say that is a fair reflection of our business, but I think if I put a camera in your house, Scott, for the next 18 months, and then I snipped it down to 20-minute episodes, I think that we're probably going to think that you're not just a poised, charming human being, but there are times when you can lose your shit, etc. Right?
Right.
So you know, you get a snippet. It's like a peek through the blinds. When we're talking about luxury brands and how you build a luxury brand, the focal point for me was to have individuals representing the brand going into very expensive homes that looked incredible. And that sets an example as to who we are, what we do, and what we do for a profession. And that very, in a simplified way, having our people going into very expensive homes and selling them is a great, how do I put this, staple as to what we do and what level of the market we work in. Okay. I do think that our industry is going through a turbulent time because we're having to recognize that the corporate brand sits behind personal brand as opposed to personal brand sitting behind corporate brand. And what does that really look like now in our world? And that's something that we're tackling, you know, every day.
Yeah. And on Buying London, viewers got a little bit of an education about the luxury real estate industry itself in London and globally. And London is the most mature and most expensive high-end residential market in Europe, but the luxury property market has been experiencing a bit of a slump. I was reading it might have been its worst year since 2020, this past year. What's been dampening the sentiment among wealthy and discretionary buyers?
Well, wealthy and discretionary buyers want to invest in markets that are either very stable or on the way up. And nowadays, when you have hypermobile wealth, you want to entice these people by offering them very, very positive tax environments, and good stability, good levels of stability, political stability. These are sort of anchor reasons why people invest in certain markets. And we have been challenging, the UK has been really challenging the ultra high net worth and saying, hey, if you want to invest in our country, you have to spend a lot of money to do that. Mm-hmm. And the instability doesn't help. Yeah. So fundamentally, we have been suffering. But then again, I think there is a point where that turns and the wise investor will sort of refocus on the UK. And I suspect that will be happening soon-ish. You know, soonish.
What does that mean?
The way you have to look at it is that global investors are benchmarking different markets. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you've seen the Dubai market go up 200%, 300%. You've seen the market in Miami just rapidly increase. You've seen these very tax efficient markets grow so fast because the capital's coming from all over the world. And at a certain point, you see the seesaw of value change. Because if you're telling me that to buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Dubai in the best development is going to cost you $3,500 a foot, and I can buy you a 2 to 3 bedroom apartment in Mayfair at $3,000 a foot, savvy investors are reconsidering what they feel is a good investment.
Right.
Yeah, because values don't continue to grow. There are reasons for them and the decline as well, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, what parts of London have been hit the hardest, and what districts and neighborhoods are actually showing
Discretion.
some promise?
Yeah, so discretionary markets. So the person who said, "Oh, look, let's buy a place in London, just a base, so we can use it for 2 months of the year, and the kids can use it." That market is very fragile because there isn't a necessity to buy. If you look at family markets, and that is dictated partially by schools and by architecture, because what we do know is that the ultra high net worths, they don't want to live on multiple floors. They want to live as laterally as possible. So the architecture of certain neighborhoods really dictate that value proposition. And so neighborhoods like Holland Park and Kensington, St John's Wood, Hampstead, Highgate, and then Barnes, just south of the river in Richmond, where you get these sort of relatively palatial homes that are double fronted, detached, carriage driveways, big gardens, and you have that sort of ecosystem of living at home, which really COVID pushed, is where value sits right now, or where people want to be right now, because they're going to make a commitment for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
It's dictated by kids.
So how are you navigating these markets?
Look, we're not playing a short-term game here. The way we navigate markets is we give people great advice. We do so by having insane. The value proposition that we have is that every decision that we make is benchmarked against data, total market data, and at the top end of the market, giving your clients more insight and doing it in a personable way creates so much more compounding value than just saying, "Hey, this is what it's worth." And so we want to give our clients more insight, and we want them to be partners in the process. So we give them access to everything, all the digital analytics and data that drives any decision making. We want to give to our clients. Yeah, essentially just build brand.
So have you seen major price cuts on properties that you've been representing?
Someone was selling their property for £26 million in London, or trying to, and now we've been appointed to sell it at £18 million. That's not because it's just gone down £8 million in value. It's because it was misvalued in the first instance. But you're seeing corrections, and now the dollar's just climbed 10% against the pound. The savvy investor is now really considering what they want to do. Now is essentially a nice window of opportunity. So you have to get this podcast out really quickly, okay?
So what were some of your firm's most notable deals last year?
We just sold a plot of land for circa 26 million, which equates to a 60 million pound transaction. There are a couple of others, but we're under NDA, so it's very difficult to talk about them.
So in terms of who's doing the buying, has it been the wealthy expats snapping up London's high-end properties thanks to favorable exchange rates?
Yes. So our world's an interesting one. I've worked at the top end of the market for a long time. What we tend to find is that you'll have some people that are buying for family reasons, and you'll have some people buying for investment, for long-term investment. But you have a group of people that are coming from their own countries, and their concern over the stability of their own country far outweighs the downside of any risk of buying in London, right? So you might be buying into a market that isn't performing particularly well, but you're much more concerned about how you're going to be treated in your own country and how your wealth is going to be treated in your own country. So there are different drivers for people to make decisions, and certainly that's one of them. Political instability around the world or natural disasters do actually force sort of wealth distribution to other markets. And that's something that we see as well a lot.
I was reading that Americans are the number one buyers of ultra prime real estate in London. That, for my listeners, that's 10 million pounds plus. It used to be the Russians and the Saudis, but that's changed.
Yeah, the Americans are definitely up there. I'm not sure they're number one, to be honest. So they've still got a way to go. And that might be enticing them to get their game together. But they're definitely up there. I would say Chinese are making significant inroads to the top end of the market, and Middle Eastern client base. But I like dealing with the American client base.
So from your experience, where's their wealth coming from?
The Americans?
Yeah.
I posted on my Instagram account about 5 years ago, we're seeing a tectonic shift in wealth, which I thought was quite a good headline. And it's without a shadow of a doubt that a lot of the wealth that's coming over here is tech generated. or hedge fund managers. But the technology piece, I think, is fascinating because the way they've created their wealth over the past decade is at their desk by their computer. And they've just been hammering it for a decade or a decade and a half. And they've been holidaying in the most efficient manner possible in the US. So like they'll be going to Miami for a beach holiday, and they'll be going to New York for a city break, or they'll be going to Aspen for skiing. They would try and commit their holidays in the most efficient manner. And then they get FOMO and they start realizing that actually we're in a globalized world now. And they see what's going on social media. They see what Portofino looks like and what London looks like in the summer and all these different neighborhoods. And now you're seeing these people wanting to sort of spread their wings, get their family more acclimatized to sort of global cultures. And that is a significant push. And London is the first sort of, when we talk about skip and jump, London's the first skip. And then the jump is to other parts of the world. But London's the base.
So are you finding these buyers are looking for a great deal and, like a business-like return on their investment, or do they really want to own something in an affluent neighborhood and feel comfortable saying that they live there?
It's both. Sometimes there's a little bit of flexing. I have an innate feeling that people are less romantic about their real estate nowadays. Don't get me wrong, you do see people fall in love with a home and want to be there for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I think that's fabulous, or build a home. But I suspect that the majority of people we're doing business with are also savvy and are less emotional about their purchases.
I want to talk about the great wealth transfer.
Yep.
So according to a recent report, a projected $18.3 trillion in wealth will be transferred globally by 2030. The great wealth transfer is expected to be the largest intergenerational transfer of assets in history. This shift will make millennials, and to a lesser extent Gen Z, the wealthiest generation in history. The potentially great wealth handover will likely have reverberations in the job market, economy, and real estate of the recipients of this largesse. Are you and your brokers already seeing the effects of this movement of assets to younger generations?
Yes, we've seen it for a while. If you look at the average age of buyers now, in the super prime segment of the market, they're in their 40s. And then you start looking at other people that we're doing business with, they're in their early 20s. I don't think it's just the wealth transfer. I think it's the opportunity of creating wealth. When it's online, you don't have any forms of real nepotism. When young people build a business, they could be 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 18 even. And if the product fits, then they can create a huge amount of wealth because they're selling to the globe. We're definitely seeing younger people in the markets, and those younger people want to deal with people that understand them. So how the corporate brand sits in that space is interesting, i.e. the language that we use. But I think that we'll find that things are just going to get so much more personal. People are going to buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And therefore, this new generation, they will rarely deal with strangers. They will deal with people that they've either grown up with or have an affiliation to, and that might be over social media channels.
London has maintained its appeal for wealthy investors, with the financial and tech sectors driving a significant portion of the demand for luxury homes, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
And in a different sector, luxury retail has entered into an escalation phase. There has been a significant acceleration of investments in the last 2 years by major luxury groups transforming their main luxury streets of London, Paris, Milan, and New York into retail enclaves. There has been a lineup of new stores on Bond Street from luxury mega brands like Balenciaga and Gucci. Tom Ford purchased a mansion in London's Chelsea district last year for about £80 million or $104 million, making it one of the most expensive home deals in the UK. Are you seeing wealthy buyers who work in luxury fashion also propping up the luxury home market in London?
Not as much. Not as much. You've got a few unicorns. Tom Ford is certainly a unicorn, yeah. We're not seeing really fashionistas buying super prime assets that regularly, okay? It's more the tech-focused buyers. And the fashionistas, they tend to create more cultural reasons to move to places, but they don't set the benchmark. So if you look at, for instance, how London's shaping, it's moved a bit like New York or Manhattan has, where all the interest in Manhattan was Upper East Side, Upper West Side, and then Soho became so phenomenally successful because you had all the artisans and designers, fashion houses focusing in that space. and the creatives, and then wealth followed. And you have the same sort of thing with London. That's happened, and you've seen markets like Marylebone grow, and Westbourne Grove, and Notting Hill, and that's partly driven by the creatives and the fashionistas who move there first, and then wealth follows.
Your firm also has a content creation arm to boost your agents' profiles and getting properties seen by the right buyers. You are one of the first British agents to adopt social media as a sales and branding tool, a technique that's been common in the US for a while. How has social media changed the way you do business?
Things are much more personal than they ever have been, and therefore more bespoke. And what I mean by that is that the product itself, the good real estate agents around the world realized that when they were showing real estate, they had to tell the story that was more relatable to the individual that was seeing the property.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, you do the same thing, but over digital channels. And it is the individual that delivers that message to their audience who is already an affiliation of them. They're already brand aligned. So that's the space where you want to emphasize the personal brand, because they're already speaking to a customer base that wants to deal with them, likes them, respect them. Obviously, there's a couple of haters in there because that's just how it works.
Right.
But really, everything's become much more bespoke. And the last thing you want in today's world is to be a stranger. So you want to make sure, particularly in the luxury segment of the market, if you're a stranger, you're distrusted. So we want our people to be recognized, known, understood, liked for all their nuances. They like cars, they're into fashion, they play with their kids on Saturdays and all this sort of stuff. It becomes hyper important because people just don't trust the man in the suit as much anymore.
Right.
And so there's much more personality, and that's what we're seeing. And we just want to enhance that so our people are more relevant and not strangers in the market.
So does that impact the way you go about hiring agents, that you bring on board? Is it just beyond, yes, the numbers are important, but how important is it for them to have a strong personal brand and large social media following from the get-go?
Look, I think it's important for us to recognize that there's value in it. Yeah, there's value in it. Fundamentally, there is value in someone who has the ability to create content and is committed to it, because they're meeting more people and therefore will create more opportunities. There are some people that want to stay off social media, and I totally appreciate that. But those people tend to have their own private networks, maybe are already particularly wealthy or come from wealthy backgrounds. Social media creates more opportunity, and therefore you have to strike a balance. But fundamentally, they need to be culturally right for our business. And that's why we have a 3-stage process of bringing people into the business. It's very, very important. These people are the face of our business, essentially.
What are the 3 stages?
Well, they get interviewed by 3 different people, and we do character assessments, and we analyze their social media channels. We look at their track record. It's quite in depth.
What do you see as the biggest difference in the way brokers and real estate agents attack business in the UK versus the US?
UK is still suffering from its attitude whereby it's been driven by nepotism and not by merit. Okay, in the US, the wonderful thing about this country is that you do have this sort of American dream where people really go and attack their worlds. Okay, and they try to be the best version of themselves. But fundamentally, the most important thing is that I believe the real estate brokers and agents in the UK have relaxed their levels of pride because they were prepared to sit behind the corporate brand. And in the US, it's opposite. You are ahead of the corporate brand. You are the brand. And therefore, you need to have a lot of pride in your business. And they're the two culturally largest differences between the groups of individuals, because there's talent everywhere. It's just how they approach work.
Do you think the US model could ever work in the UK?
Well, it's working because we're now the 4th most influential real estate business across the UK at marketing and selling homes over £5 million. And we did that 4.5 years prior to Netflix. Sorry, 4 years prior to Netflix, and without any paid media spend.
So looking at the trends, what are wealthy buyers looking for in a luxury home beyond merely acquiring the property in terms of design and decor, amenities, sustainability elements, etc.?
I'm not sure they're committed to the sustainability part just yet. They're committed to we've been too fascinated around this concept of lifestyle. I think they're more focused now on live style. how are they going to live? What does the space look like? What are the volumes? Which way do we face? What is the sunlight? These are the features that you can't necessarily change, and they are much more conscious around them. So there's that. And the other thing is that we're going to probably step into a world now where health and well-being gets incorporated into real estate, using technology and just using space differently. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that and commitment to that.
How about safety?
Everyone wants to feel safe,
right? I don't know. I thought there was.
Right?
I don't know if there's an increase in.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said about the UK and its current position on safety. Okay, there's a lot on social media about people's phones being stolen and stuff like
Right.
that. But I think there's an element of balance that we need to have when we talk about stuff like this. Obviously, you shouldn't be at risk when you're on the streets of your city. But then I come to the US and I speak to some of my clients here, and they're nervous to send their kids to school sometimes because people carry guns here. There is an element of balance that's required when making these considerations, but we should all feel safe. That's down to our governments and local municipalities.
So it's the start of a new year. Europe remains a magnet for affluent investors. What are you forecasting for the luxury residential market in 2025?
I think that we need to see some political stability. If we see some more political stability, we'll see more wealth transfer, not just through families, but across the world. I think we're going to see a lot more people investing in other cities as travel increases. And I think more Americans are traveling now than ever before, and that's inevitable. I think we'll find that everyone becomes a global investor. And that means that you're going to have secondary markets that are going to start testing the first stage markets like London and New York, and we're going to see more growth that way. So that's a fascinating. If you can stay ahead of times when it comes to culture, and see where people are enticed to go, and if they feel committed to buying real estate, I think that you need to essentially follow the money and follow the culture.
Well, Daniel, my final question is the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests.
Okay.
So if you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one single luxury item with you, what would that luxury item be? It can't be any form of air or water transportation to get you off that island, or anything that requires mobile service so you can call somebody to pick you up off that island.
Okay.
It's just you on this lonely island, lots of sand, palm trees, hermit crabs here and there, lots of ocean. What would that one single luxury item you would like to have with you?
Okay. So I'm a very simple man. I'm a super duper. I might work in the luxury sphere and it might be really fancy and everything, but I'm a fundamentally really simple man. So the item that I would really want is a football. And it would give me hours of entertainment every day. And I would love that.
Well, let's just hope that football does not, accidentally kicked into the ocean.
Burst on a porcupine or something.
Daniel Daggers, owner of real estate company ddre.global and star of Netflix's Buying London. Thank you so much for joining me on The Luxury Item.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.